I remember the first time I watched paddle streaming on a screen, and a player ran to the glass, and I was like shaking because I was like, "Oh, the glass is going to break," and the glass, moves and vibrates, but doesn't break. And Australia's pushing hard for paddle, and we're very confident, and hopeful that it'll be included in the Olympics in 2032, and that's very exciting.
Rabid fan bases for paddle across the world, the Middle East, Europe, and South America, and the United States is starting to take hold as far as the newest place of a burgeoning market around paddle. And there's no person to talk to us about the emergence of the sport in the United States on the Sports Media with a Human Touch podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley. Then Scott Colebourne. He is Executive Director of the United States Paddle Association. Scott, it is an honor to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Brian. Happy to chat with you, and I'm always excited to talk about paddle.
One of the things that just came to mind was just a few days ago, if it wasn't yesterday, the New York Times had an article talking about the boom of paddle in Miami as really a landmark spot for the sport. As the sport continues to grow, what are you seeing parallels between cities in terms of what makes them more willing to adopt and accept the sport with more players, say, than other cities?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So the sport really started in the US in Houston, Texas, in the mid 90s and has grown from there. There's real strongholds in paddle in South Florida, and all the major cities in Texas have strong programs: Houston, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, and even further south in southern Texas, Southern California, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco all have growing numbers of players. I would say the common thread between those is a willingness for entrepreneurs and owners, investors to start clubs. There's not a lot of courts and parks right now, so someone has to have the willingness to take the leap of faith and start the club. And initially, it's often popular with the international cultures. So those from abroad, Mexico, South America, Europe, have maybe some experience with paddle already. We're also seeing markets grow with those that have not from those countries, racket sports enthusiasts, tennis players, pickleball players that have discovered the sport and really fall in love. So, yep, South Florida is definitely the epicenter of play right now, but across Texas, California, New York, there's, paddle courts in almost every state now, so it is gaining popularity.
I was reading an article also, I think it was with City Biz that it came out a few days ago, and it mentioned how before 2020, there were only like 30 paddle courts in the United States. And now there are close to 700, and there are paddle courts in 31 different states, namely some of the ones that you talked about. The other thing that was interesting that I know the gatekeepers of the sport like yourself are focusing on with paddle is not just treating this as a sport, as a hobby, but I've heard the phrase making this a cultural phenomena. What does that mean to you, a cultural phenomena, in terms of how that can best suit this generation of folks who are inclined to see, hey, what's going on with this? What is paddle?
Sure. Yeah, I think paddle inherently is an incredibly social sport. Four players almost always play doubles together. It's very easy to play in a short amount of time. So you could, a full match might take an hour and 15, hour and 30 minutes, but you can have a good solid match and play a set in 30 minutes and then switch partners, switch opponents with people on other courts. So there's a real social nature to it. Being enclosed inside the glass with the other three players also makes it very social. And I think part of the push after COVID was people want to get out and do stuff with other people and connect. And we're definitely hearing of paddle clubs becoming the third place for many people, hanging out at the cafe there, bringing their laptop, working from there, doing deals there. I myself have visited Miami on many occasions and had a few hours to spare, but no racket in hand, but headed to a club in Miami just to hang out because I knew there'd be food and Wi-Fi and nice weather. So I think that social connection is really making it super, super popular with many, many people. And that's, I think, part of making it a cultural phenomenon. I think that today's not just the younger generation, but I think all generations are increasingly focused on healthy living. And paddle is definitely a great way to meet other people in a healthy space and be fit and be outside. And because of the uh, some other sports are inherently difficult. Golf is a very difficult sport. Tennis can be a difficult sport. Paddle is relatively straightforward to start playing. And so I think that brings a lot of people into the sport that may feel intimidated in other sporting arenas.
Speaking of this sport in paddle, on social media, there are so many viral clips of some outstanding points that have been played out. And so, from a cultural standpoint and what all is being done here to drum up more support, where do you think the sport is and where it can improve from a social media standpoint in the role that social media can play and where it's maybe lacking in the expansion of paddle?
Sure. I think paddle is an amazing sport on social media. As you mentioned, the clips where the ball goes outside the glass, the players run out the door, they hit it back in. I mean, some of the points are truly amazing. And the athleticism in each of those points is very apparent. There's a lot of sports out there that have incredibly high athletic entry points. But they don't really look necessarily so athletic. A lineman in football is incredibly athletic, but pushing against another big lineman doesn't look that athletic necessarily. But when you're hitting the ball, jumping in the air, running outside the glass, hitting the ball over a wall, back into the core, and the ball's bouncing on different. And so that 360 view really does make it great sport for social media and for videos to be shared and to create viral moments. One of the things that the USPA is focusing on in the future is not just live streaming the USPA circuit, but live streaming creating the highlights package from the live stream to share those afterwards. We're seeing very a team announcement for the USPA, could get upwards of 10,000 views very easily in one day. And that's just purely a team announcement. It's not a viral video. It's not a clip of some amazing, outstanding feat. So, the paddle players want to share their progress. They want to share their play. And there are a lot of tech products out there that are coming to the market that enable that, where you can record your games, post them online afterwards, post a clip afterwards. So I think social media is definitely having a big role in the growth of paddle. And it is a great sport to watch on social.
You speak about the attributes of what makes somebody want to play paddle, or the entry point is not as challenging as, say, a golf or perhaps a tennis. What are you seeing attributes wise from the fan who might want to play, but is a racket sports fan, likes to watch the pros, likes to say maybe check out pickleball, obviously will watch tennis, in that which you're seeing the attributes of somebody who is most interested in giving paddle a shot and watching it on TV or on a stream as a fan?
Sure. For I kind of view tennis as the elder statesman of racket sports, and I don't see the popularity of tennis, and we're here in the US, obviously, and in European countries, and tennis is very popular, and I think it's going to continue to be very popular. You've got global superstars playing around the world, a well-established circuit, competing with big sponsors and large sums of money. But I do think that the interest in tennis does also drive interest in paddle. You see a lot of tennis players playing paddle. At the Cincinnati Open, the Masters 1000 on the women's and the men's side, there was a paddle court there in the players area. Word has it the players were non-stop playing paddle on the court. And so there's a high interest there. And I do think that also drives interest in wanting to try another racket sport. And so the people that are trying paddle are internationals that have seen it played somewhere else, tennis players who might not play tennis anymore but want to try something different, as well as those just seeking a fun outdoor, social, athletic lifestyle. So I think it's got universal appeal.
What is interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Scott, is that in tennis, there's obviously more popularity around watching singles. But in paddle, from my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I find, at least personally, more excitement generated around watching doubles and seeing all the things that are happening in such close quarters inside the glass. Why do you think that might be, that I'd be more interested in watching paddle from a double standpoint, even when doubles in tennis is nowhere near as popular as singles?
I think one of the aspects of it is that in doubles in tennis, the point can be ended quite quickly. Serve, miss, serve, return, winner, serve, return, volley, winner, the point's over. I think because the walls keep the ball alive, the ball does go very quickly around people, but the ball is almost never dead. And, paddle is primarily only played in doubles, and having that strategic element of play when you're playing, okay, I'm going to not hit this person, but that's a weaker shot in this direction. The strategic element is super important. And then from the spectator perspective, having both players there and both players being able to reach the ball, one player's run outside the wall, the other player's covering the middle of the court. I think, doubles really is what Padel was known for. And yeah, it is interesting. It also creates another element in terms of who's partnered with who plays well with who. Definitely players have a side of the court that they kind of only play on. And so that element in partnerships really is a big factor to it. For the USPA and all of our international competitions, whether it's the Absolute, which is our professional highest level men's and women's team, all the way down to our junior teams, when we compete, internationally, we only compete in pairs or team competitions. So it's always, a pair playing together to represent the country. It's never a singles competition. So it's inherently part of the game.
Part of the game is increasing visibility of it. How TV friendly is paddle in watching it and what that looks like right now? And
Sure.
what can it do to get better at that?
So we're incredibly lucky in paddle. The World Tour, or the equivalent of the World Tour, has been around for a number of years under different variations. The current variation, Premier Paddle, is a very well produced tournament circuit. So we had Miami Premier P1 earlier this year in Miami, Florida. The production level of that is outstanding. If you watch any of that, as we speak, it's early September. The Paris Major is on right now. It's one of the major tournaments on the Premier Padel circuit. It's held at Roland Garros, the site of the French Open. And so the production level is amazing at Padel, and they've done a really good job of making that production level super, super high in terms of the player walkout, the matches, the highlights, and so that's fantastic. We're catching up with that in the USA with the USPA circuit and trying to do a better job of the production level. But thankfully, at the global level, there's a lot of excitement around the points in the USA right now. Maybe not all the players know the top paddle players, but the quality of points is outstanding. And then for those that have ever had the chance to watch high level paddle live, just the sound of the ball and the player's movement. I remember the first time I watched paddle streaming on a screen, and a player ran to the glass, and I was like shaking because I was like, "Oh, the glass is going to break," and the glass, moves and vibrates, but doesn't break. And then when you watch paddle live, the sound of the ball off the top players' rackets is really something to behold. It kind of, makes you jump almost like, "Oh, is that a crack or a gunshot?" And what's going on there? It just is so hard sometimes.
What also helps you want to fixate your attention on the sport even more is the commentators, the broadcasters. What do you feel like the sport is best suited for in a broadcaster compared to, say, what traditionally a tennis commentator would sound like? Are there similarities? Are there differences? Is that flow something that can parallel paddle, or is it a little bit different? Or are we still learning about what works and what doesn't, and what each fan base in different countries appreciates more?
Yeah, I think there's an emerging opportunity here in the USA for commentary on paddle. Just the lack of tournaments at the highest professional level in the US have created a void there right now. Uh, I watched the English version of the World Championships last year, so it's known as the FIP World Cup. FIP stands for International Paddle Federation, and the World Cup is the US team played in the World Cup. The men's team finished 13th, the women's team finished 15th in the World Cup in Qatar last year. The next World Cup will be next year. It's every 2 years. Traditionally or historically, Argentina and Spain have faced off in the final, and that's an amazing occasion. These two, powerhouse countries in the sport. A lot of the players at the top of the Premier Paddle Tour are partners either with each other or with someone from the opposite country. So you get these really unique pairings. And then it's three lines per match. So line one, line two, line three. So, often it all comes down to the final match and featuring maybe, four of the top eight or six players in the world are playing that final match. So I listened to English commentary on that. That was really interesting. It was, the commentators were native Spanish speakers and doing their best to commentate in English. Definitely had vibes of the, South American soccer broadcast when someone, scores a goal and just go, paddle, on and on and on. But it was very exciting. The commentators made it very exciting. And I think right now it's on commentators and broadcast in the US to help educate the viewers as they are watching, learn some of the specific terms that are used in the game. It's a game originated in Mexico. So inherently it's a Spanish language game, so some of the terms that in English and tennis, deuce, forehand, advantage, these overhead, ground stroke, a lot of the terms are Spanish terms in paddle. And so it's on the commentators to help educate the viewers as they go through that journey together.
The Vibora as one term that can be used. From the
Yeah.
World Cup to another global games, the Olympics, there is a push. Paddle in 2032. What is going on behind the scenes to make that possible?
Sure. So obviously the Olympic Games coming up in LA in 2028. There's going to be a lot of interest in paddle around that event. When we think of global events in the USA right now, we just had the FIFA World Club Cup. There was club teams that rented out paddle clubs around the US for the entire week they were in town. We anticipate the FIFA World Cup next year going to be a big event for the paddle clubs in host cities. And LA 2028 is, going to be a great occasion as well. There's going to be a lot of pop-ups with paddle in and around LA during that time. The USPA is looking at doing some tournaments in the area, kind of pre Olympics for 2028. And then a really big push is happening at the global level with the International Paddle Federation, meeting constantly with the IOC, starting the paperwork to become approved by the IOC to become Olympic sport. It's up to the Australian Olympic Committee to kind of put forward paddle. Obviously there's lots of parties working together to push towards that, including FIP, including the IOC. Australia has really invested heavily in paddle. Paddle in Australia falls under the governance of Tennis Australia. So tennis and paddle have the same governance there. I'm from New Zealand and have familiarity with the Australian system. Australia has a real strong history with sports. They established the Australian Institute of Sport, almost 35 years ago as a government entity to promote athletes in their country to get in the Olympic standard and compete internationally. That just does not happen. The federal government is not funding sports in the USA like they are in Australia. So Australia is pushing hard for paddle, and we're very confident and hopeful that it'll be included in the Olympics in 2032. And that's very exciting for some of our junior players right now. It's 2025, so you think 7 years ahead, who's going to be competing for the USA at that time. We do have some young males and females that are 12 right now that'll be in line for that in 7 years' time. We've also got some young stars of the absolute team right now that are 18 and 19. Those players will be 25, 26 in 7 years' time. So they'll very well be in the prime of their career. And so it's going to be an interesting time as we lead up to the 2032 Olympics.
It sounds like it would be perfect timing. And it goes without saying that you can't deny the global interest in the sport. At some point, it's just going to have to happen. The Olympics and paddle are going to be coming together, and grateful for all that you're doing and so many others to make that happen in 2032. Such an honor. Scott Colebourne, Executive Director of the United States Paddle Association. I'm Bryan Fenley. Scott, thanks so much for this. This was really fun.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate the time. Always happy to speak to anyone about paddle and about what's happening in the sport and meet others who are helping us to reach our lofty goals.